Hello, Space Junkies, and welcome to What a Piece of Junk episode number 118. We will be talking on this episode about Star Wars Visions Season 2 and a few other pieces of Star Wars news. And I can't do it without my original Wookiee co pilot, our very own Dave Filclone, the man of 1,000 nicknames. It's Mr. Nathan Miracle. Nathan, how's it going?
It
Oh,
is
hang on.
going.
I gotta fix the Shuro translator.
It is going great. Having a great day here. Tears of the Kingdom, The Legend of Zelda comes out tomorrow, which is not a Star Wars thing at all, but I'm super excited about that. But you know what? I'm excited about a lot of Star Wars things too that we'll get to talk about. Visions, and as you mentioned, some other things. I've got some special treats today.
Excellent. And speaking of special treats, we thought that Derek wasn't going to be able to make it to this episode, but he's actually joining us from the road. Derek, how's it going? And are you safe out there?
Well, it is a beautiful day, at least, as it's been high 70s, low 80s here in the Midwest, which is nice. And as you mentioned, yeah, I am driving home late from a week of travel at work, and there's a bit of traffic, so enough that I feel pretty confident and safe that I can drive while at least talking a little bit of visions, because I definitely wanted to talk with you guys on what I thought was a fun and exciting season 2.
Yeah, it was. And it's so much of a event that we have a very special guest on the show. So, everybody act professional. It's Commander Kyle. Kyle, what's up, man?
I've had a vision, and it was me being on What a Piece of Junk. But what I really want to know, Derek, is what happens when Vader boards your blockade runner there. You gonna have a little problem there? Are we talking Rogue One type things going on?
I might have to do a trench run. I don't know.
I'm just saying, but no, I'm excited. Vision Season 2 is here. I am wearing, of course, my Star Wars Vision Season 1 shirt.
Yes, very nice.
In excitement for this. And I gotta say, guys, just right off the bat, Vision Season 2 surprised me more than I thought it would.
Okay, good. I was also surprised by it. In some ways good, in some ways not so good, but we'll talk about that in just a bit. First up, we have some huge Star Wars gaming news that happened this week that has me and Nathan, and probably Derek to a certain extent, very excited. We're all, of course, big-time fans of card games, mostly Star Trek these days, but we still love the old-school Decipher Star Wars CCG, a product also near and dear to the heart of our fellow FPN founder Kevin Reitzel, since he used to help make that game. But this week, we got an announcement from Fantasy Flight Games that a new Star Wars trading card game will be released by the company in 2024. It's titled Star Wars Unlimited, has its own website now at starwarsunlimited.com, and there's a press release there talking about the game, and less about the gameplay, but more about the way the company plans to produce it. And that is, Nathan, a traditional trading card game. So, Nathan, what does that mean?
Wait. So you're telling me that they're not going to be packaged with dice?
No.
That it's not going to be a living card game where you get, fixed packs and every deck is the same 90% of the time because everybody has all the same cards? I'm actually going to be able to open up a booster box and open up packs and actually trade my cards with you and whoever else we can whoever else happens to like to play that game.
Yes, that is what I'm saying. So I guess give us the rundown of, beyond the whole trading aspect and randomized boosters, what does it mean to have a traditional trading card game, especially coming from Fantasy Flight?
Well, the big thing is that it's not a living card game, which is what Fantasy Flight Games has done for most of their card games. So you will get randomized cards in your packs. We also know that this game is built for multiplayer. So it seems like everybody's going to be able to build their own deck. You'll just have the one deck that you can play against anybody else, rather than having a light side and a dark side, and you have to bring two decks to every game, like you did with the Decipher Star Wars card game.
Yeah, yeah, I'm encouraged by that idea of just having one deck to keep up with. Obviously you can build more decks if you want to, but not having to build specialized ones for each side or specialized ones for one-on-one play versus multiplayer sounds like a good idea. Derek, I know that you're big into the Decipher Star Wars card game, and you're also not super keen about Fantasy Flight's track record. What are your thoughts about this idea of Star Wars Unlimited?
I am very hesitant, as I always am with FFG at this point, just because I feel we've been burned so many times with their CCG, TCG, whatever you want to say, or even just Star Wars games. Because, as most know, Fantasy Flight has had a lot of things taken away from them the past several years because they have not been very good. They're great at making games, but they're not great at sustaining games. And it's kind of ironic that, as we talk about, Decipher made such a great game for Star Wars and Star Trek that continuing committees and player committees are still keeping them alive 20 plus years after they've lost the license to those games. So whether this has the traction or not, I don't know. We'll see. I like the idea, but I know FFG one does not do a lot of the production of their games in-house or in the United States at all. So having to continue to rely on the China market does not have me excited, considering I work in logistics and I understand how transportation world works, considering every week there's some type of impact to the global supply chain network. And two, they're terrible at running their own competitive tournaments, which is the whole reason we play our games, right? So,
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to do a kitchen table game, that's fine. But then why does it need to be a TCG? Why not just do a living card game? Or what a lot of us actually really want is a co-op game. That's what I've been waiting for. Like, I still do a bit of the Marvel Champions LCG, which to me would be perfect had they just reskinned it for Star Wars, and we have that. But, again, they're not delivering that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, for the kitchen table game, we have the deck building game, and that game is great. I love that game. We don't need another kitchen table game. That one is good. I'd love to see expansions to it as well. Caleb, just
If you're listening, Caleb, go ahead and make an expansion.
we
Kyle,
will buy it.
Yeah. Kyle, one of the main things the company talked about in this press release is that they understand fans are not happy with the way they've handled the Star Wars license before, and they have missed a lot of deadlines for Star Wars products. It's almost like the way the films are happening right now, where people are expecting things to happen on a certain timetable, and then they don't. I know you're not huge into tabletop games, Kyle, but when it comes to people missing Star Wars product deadlines, how do you think that affects fans?
Well, as far as like a tabletop game goes, I'm glad to see they're trying, but considering the history of this company, and I've worked in the comic shops, I know how these things work. You can't be missing deadlines, and you can't. There's too much competition out there right now to be putting out an inferior product or a product that isn't up to par. The other aspect of this too is, and I don't care what it is, whether it's a tabletop game or something, you still have Disney hovering over you. At a moment's notice, they can go, "We don't like what you're doing. We're taking your toy away." And I think they're very close to that happening. And if this system isn't really well done for this game, and this game needs to perform at a high level. I kind of compare it to where Electronic Arts was with the Star Wars franchise. Disney was sitting there ready to just yank it from them, and then they pulled out Jedi Fallen Order, and now the Amazing Jedi Survivor as well. And they really saved their bacon in keeping that license. And I mean, for those of you who haven't, I have picked up Jedi Survivor for my PlayStation 5, and what little chance I've gotten to play with it has been a blast. But
did you have Mark Hamill in your corner?
Oh yeah, of course. I just have the direct app to Mark. I just FaceTime him whenever I need him. But a great ad campaign, by the way. That is one of the cool, funnest ad campaigns they've done. But no, I think it's so important because with Star Wars, I mean, and I also kind of look at it, guys, as kind of where we're at in gaming too, is that you have so many people who are still holding on to these 20-year ago card systems and game systems.
Yeah.
Because they haven't really innovated since then. And sometimes if it's not broke, why do you need to fix it? Or why do you need to reinvent? Don't reinvent the wheel. And I think there's a lot, and fine tune it, not reinvent it. And I think that's where I think this company has really kind of dropped the ball on a lot of things. Is like they're trying to reinvent the wheel when it doesn't need to.
And that's what I think they mean when they say that this is a no gimmicks game. They did try to reinvent the wheel with both the living card game model and with the dice mechanic in Destiny. That was a huge reinvention of the wheel to add dice into a card game. And bespoke dice, like every card has its own die, not just I roll 6-sided dice.
Just stick with the Magic the Gathering method. Make it a collectible card game, and that's all you need to do.
Yeah, so
and that's what they're doing with this, according to the press release, anyway.
Yeah, I do share.
Well, you have to have a competitive scene.
Yes, you have to have a competitive scene with a game like this. So I share Derek's concern. FFG has dropped the ball on that in the past, but at the same time, it's got Star Wars on it. It's a card game.
Yeah,
we're gonna buy it.
I'm not going to not buy it. I'm just going to buy it.
Sit here and
Yeah, I'm just going to buy it with the understanding that 2 or 3 years down the line, I may have a bunch of cards that I use as backers for Star Trek cards.
Yeah, we would be lying if we sat here and said we weren't going to buy it. We'd be lying to ourselves chiefly, but also to everybody listening. Right? Yeah. Anyway, so you can be sure that next year, when the game comes out, we will probably do an entire episode of the podcast talking about how it happens and what's it like and how does it play.
I am going to add one thing. One thing I am excited about the game, though, is that it's going to be new artwork. And they're not going to be recycling their old artwork that they've been doing for like 8-9 years now. So that is one super thing I'm forward looking to it.
Yeah, because there are images that appeared in the original Miniatures game,
Imperial
Assault, in Legion, in the RPG, in Destiny.
Yep.
And probably
and some of them from the LCG.
There you go. That's the fifth thing. I was thinking there's some images that have been used 5 times.
And some of them were also
those.
used by Fantasy Flight Games in X-Wing.
Oh, yeah.
And Armada.
And Armada, yes.
So I don't know that there's any that have been used in all 7 of those, but there are certainly ones that have been in more than half of them.
Yeah.
Anyway,
so I'm excited that it will have new artwork and artwork that is all the same style as each other. So you don't have clashing styles across different cards, which is great.
There are times where you should have clashing styles and times when you shouldn't. But we'll talk about visions later.
Yes. All right. Well, Nathan, you had a pretty great Star Wars week. Tell us how you won an awesome prize. And then, you look much better and much more comfortable in this episode of the podcast. And you can tell us why that is as well.
Yeah, so I'm going to start off with that one. And that is, I bought a Secret Labs chair. I've been thinking about this for months. They're very expensive, so I'm not going to sit here and tell you that it was cheap. But they're really good, too. I'm so excited because I feel so much better. But I didn't just buy a Secret Labs chair. If I'm going to buy a fancy chair, it's going to be a Star Wars chair. So I have the Imperial Stormtrooper Secret Labs chair. That's right. I'll always be missed by the chair. I'm sure there's some Stormtrooper joke in there somewhere. Only if Tarkin orders them to miss.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Can you perhaps show us the back of the chair as well?
I can show you part of the back of the chair. We've got the Imperial cog here. What I can't show you, at least not without getting out of the chair and picking it up, is along the lower back, it has in Arabush the word Stormtrooper.
Neat.
And that's vertical towards the back bottom. So really cool. I love that detail of putting it in Arabush. And since I read Arabush fluently, or at least can Google what the symbols are, I was able to figure that out. Also, Trooper was easier to figure out than than Storm.
But yes.
The other cool thing that I have, or one of the other cool things that I'll have, because we'll talk about t-shirts later too, is Kyber candy.
Ooh.
So this comes from a, well, I guess YouTuber is the closest thing that they're influencer, content creator. That's what we'll call them. The Super Carlin brothers. They are primarily a Harry Potter channel, but they cover a bunch of other fandoms as well. Disney. The thing they're most famous for is the Pixar theory that all of the Pixar movies are interconnected. Which I don't know that they came up with that theory, but they certainly popularized it and came up with a bunch of the connections. But they do also talk about Star Wars. This past week, or a week ago Friday, they had a patron-only trivia contest, and it was Star Wars. And I have to say I'm disappointed with my performance. I got 5th in both flights of the trivia. I'm disappointed that I didn't get first both times. I was off my game.
Well, we're disappointed in you too.
Was
it 5th at 5 out of 5, or was there more than 5 people?
No, there was like 50 people.
Okay, well, that's better. That's still top 10.
That's better. But I still feel Disney's ready. The hand of Disney is hanging over you, ready to take your Star Wars fan.
Yeah, their Filclone has betrayed them.
Yeah. See, there were a few questions. Like one of them was the name of the person that they got the Beskar spear from, and I always just call that character the Magistrate. So I had forgotten her actual name, so I missed that one. There were a couple others that I overthought. And realized, right after I clicked on the button, oh, that was the wrong answer. It should have been that. Yeah, I'm disappointed. But top 5 was still good enough to win the Kyber candy.
Oh, hey, it's 2 colors.
It is 2 colors. You see, it has a light side and a dark side, and it's got these sprinkles in it. And I have been patiently waiting, not biting into this candy, just so I could break off a couple pieces and try them on air and see if it's any good.
Let's hope it's good for their sake.
Right, yeah. You're going to take that bite, then take a light side bite, and then I want you to take the bar, hold it, and then bite right in the center so that you get both at the same time.
There must be balance in the candy force.
That's right.
There you go. Or he's a gray Jedi, one or the other.
I don't know. I think by facial expression, for those of you watching on the YouTube channel, he's leaning towards the dark side.
Yeah,
no.
When he took that bite of the light side, his face expression very much changed.
Is it like a white chocolate?
Yeah, it's white chocolate and dark chocolate. And I actually think I like the white chocolate better.
All right.
I'm a white chocolate person myself, so I probably would like that.
Jedi bite. We're all waiting patiently.
But now technically it's broken Kyber candy.
It is a broken Kyber crystal candy.
So
it is
because it's broken. It's Sith Kyber candy.
He's going to need to go to see Aura, and she's got to perform her song to restore the candy.
Right. That's right.
That was very delicious, as one would expect from a chocolate bar. The sprinkles don't really have all that much flavor, so it pretty much just is a chocolate bar. But you get light side and dark side. Super Carlin Brothers do have them for sale, but I didn't have to pay for mine because I know a bunch of Star Wars.
That made it taste all the sweeter.
Yes, it did.
Victory!
Well, all right, Nathan, describe the dark one and the light one, and then, was it worth it to do the bite down the center?
All right, well, here's where you find out that there's a reason I'm not a food critic. The dark side was good and chocolatey. The light side was good and white chocolatey. So the dark side is 60% cacao, so it's not the darkest chocolate I've ever eaten, but it's certainly not milk chocolate. So depends on how much you like dark chocolate as to whether you'd like that or not.
So we're saying it's more Asajj Ventress than it is Darth Maul.
Right. Yes. And then the gray bite, honestly, you know what? in keeping with the fact that I don't particularly care for the idea of gray Jedi in the first place, I think I liked it better individually on both sides.
So be hot or be cold.
Yes, yeah. If you're lukewarm, I'll spit you out.
Spit you out. Yep.
So did you admit that you don't like Rey Skywalker?
Rey Skywalker is not a gray Jedi.
I don't know. She got a yellow lightsaber.
So do a bunch of temple guards. That doesn't make them gray Jedi either.
These people had yellow lightsabers. Oh, but now if we get the new movie with Rey in it, we can debate the whole gray Jedi thing ad nauseum. Then I'm sure, because I feel like they're gonna emphasize the whole yellow lightsaber blah 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 thing.
So and I guess in Ahsoka they're going to be orange lightsabers now, and that's close to yellow too. So
Yes.
Yeah, but then they can be for the Tennessee Volunteers, and then we're all good.
Here's my thing, though. I mean, when it's 2035 when we actually see these movies, because maybe by then the writer's strike will be over.
Yeah.
And Kathleen Kennedy out, and we could actually get somebody making a decision.
Yeah, she will definitely be retired by 2035.
Let's hope.
We think.
Well,
But
unless
that cloning technology and Sith magic. I'm just saying.
and cyborg parts,
Yeah.
Yes.
It'll be more machine.
So you're saying So you're saying that all this is actually a biopic on Kathleen Kennedy?
Yes. 3D printed replacement part. All right. Anyway, cool. Well, I'm glad that the chocolate bar was worth the wait, Nathan, and we will not look askew at you if you sneak a few more bites during this episode of the podcast.
Yeah, there's one little chunk that fell off that.
You gotta eat that part.
I might have a view askew, but
That's right. Yes.
Snoochie Booties.
All right. Well,
just remember, Scott, he's got a second candy bar. You can always drive over there and take it from him.
No, because I gave that to Andrea, and that's gone.
The right move. That is the right move. Give the chocolate to your girlfriend. That is the correct move. All right. Well, we're going to take a little break so you guys can hear about the rest of the Fandom Podcast Network, and then we'll come back and talk some Star Wars Visions.
Thank you for listening. We hope you're enjoying this podcast. Here are the other great shows on the Fandom Podcast Network. Culture Clash, where we discuss the latest in entertainment and pop culture. Blood of Kings, our show covering the entire Highlander universe. Couch Potato Theater, we celebrate our favorite movies. And Time Warp, our fandom flashback show discussing a year in movies and our favorite retro movie, TV, and pop culture topics. Good Evening, discussing all things Alfred Hitchcock. Hair Metal Podcast, we cover the rock metal music of the 80s and early 90s. Type 40, a Doctor Who podcast, discussing the time-traveling Doctor Who universe. Lethal Mullet, an action film podcast covering the 80s, 90s, and beyond. Also, check out the Lethal Mullet Network for more great podcasts. What a Piece of Junk, our Star Wars podcast. Making Treks, a Star Trek podcast, with a deep dive into the final frontier. The Fandom Show, our Fandom Podcast Network live YouTube show discussing the hottest topics in fandom. The True Believers MCU podcast, discussing the Marvel Cinematic and Television Universe. Union Federation, our Star Trek and the Orville Show. And we're proud to welcome the BQN Network to the Fandom Podcast Network. Please visit our friends on the BQN Network, a Star Trek Universe podcast that also includes your favorite topics, movies, history, superheroes, and more. You can find the Fandom Podcast Network on YouTube. The Fandom Podcast Network is also on all major podcast platforms. The Fandom Podcast Network audio master feed is on Podbean at fpnet.podbean.com. You can find the Fandom Podcast Network on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can email us at fandompodcastnetwork@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening, and remember, respect others and enjoy your fandom.
All right, great. Thanks so much, Kevin. Okay, guys, Star Wars Visions Season 2. I don't know about y'all, but I really enjoyed the idea of Star Wars Visions, and I really liked Season 1. We had a great episode where we analyzed each of those entries last time around. So we're going to continue the tradition now by analyzing all of these entries here in Season 2. First up is the episode titled simply Sith. Kyle, what are your thoughts about this? This is the one where a former Sith apprentice finds their peaceful life threatened. This was the Sith apprentice girl with the cybernetic arm that was an artist and had a very unique way of looking at the nature of the Force.
First of all, I want to say I'm grateful to have season 2 of Star Wars Visions. I was very excited when they announced it. I was a little skeptical because they weren't sticking with Japanese animation houses, because I'm a huge fan of that. But I just want to say I was pleasantly surprised by this season of Visions. It came across a lot better than I thought. And actually, I think Sith was one of my top episodes of this season of Visions. I really liked the art style they had with it, as well as just the uniqueness of it with the coloring and how they used the art to reflect the dark side and the light side. I love the design of some of the vehicles, like the bike she was riding was very cool. Mm-hmm. And the design of the Sith Lord that comes after her is also very well done. I can see where this one wouldn't be some people's cup of tea because of just how real artistic style of it. But I found this one to be fascinating in how they approached it and what they gave to us in it. This is one of those ones like Vision Season 1 where, yeah, I'd be curious to know more about this character and find out some more about this character and maybe get a revisit of this character somewhere down the line.
Yeah, I agree very much. This one's probably my number 2 favorite one of the new 9 entries here in season 2 of Visions. I'd love to watch another adventure with Lola, the artist girl, and her droid. I thought her droid was a cool little droid. He was almost like a dark side version of BB-8, not quite as direct as BB-9, but and yes, the wheel bike design was so cool and an awesome homage to General Grievous's wheel bike as well. And I loved the design of Lola's lightsaber. At first, I thought it was simply a light cutlass, if you will. But then when she really had to buckle down and fight the Sith Lord, she turned on the other side, and it was a double-bladed, almost like a fan blade looking thing of the 2 cutlasses. And Derek, once again, there was an orange-y yellow lightsaber blade coming out of one side of Lola's hilt there. So Nathan, what were your thoughts about Sith, the first one of the Visions episodes?
So it's very artistic, looked beautiful. I found it a little hard to follow at times. And part of that is because of how artistic it was and how much white space there was. I wasn't sure where the main character was at the beginning. When she stepped out onto the planet's surface, that surprised me. Like I thought she might be on like Hoth or something, right. Just because of how white everything was. And then I couldn't tell exactly what all the paint colors were or why they were there. So for me, it didn't quite do it. I didn't hate it, but I didn't particularly love it either. Plus, as I mentioned with the Grey Jedi, I don't really like the idea. I don't think Grey Jedi really can exist. You don't have to be a Jedi, but you're either light side or dark side. This whole right. Walking in between the two, I don't think really is a thing. But it certainly was a thing in this episode, with her having the red lightsaber and then the not red lightsaber for the good.
And she even says to her former master, I have both light and dark in me. And, I'm all about the artistic expression. Although it's important to note that while it is definitely true that George Lucas and Dave Filoni have said Grey Jedi are not a thing, that is in, if you will permit me the parlance, Star Wars Prime. Mm-hmm. And Visions is very upfront about how a lot of these stories are almost alternate realities influenced by Star Wars. So maybe in this world where Lola and E2 live, Grey Jedi are a thing.
That is certainly a possibility.
Maybe she is way more about the Bendu, the one in the middle.
Yeah. So for that reason, I'm not going to sit here and tell y'all that you should hate it, but it was certainly not in my list of favorite ones.
All right, Derek, what were your thoughts about this very artistic and almost the tale of a Force-sensitive artist?
I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a good first entry because for the very exact reasons you guys were talking about, it was almost a meta story because she was artistic, right? She was doing visions and artwork. She was having visions in her sleep, right? And I thought it was really good. And at first, it is kind of tough to understand, like, is this all in her head, or is she somewhere, like, what's missing, right? And as the story progresses, it really starts to fill itself out. And I think, it did a really good job of, I think, you know, someone who believes there are gray Jedi, because I think it's the same way you can look at anyone in life, where some people make great choices and those same people can make bad choices, right? It doesn't mean they're a bad or a great person. They just, make choices based off what they feel is right. And sometimes that is what, you may say morally or ethically or whatever. And sometimes you may say they're not, right? So I think that's the idea of, where she did a lot of bad things and she decided that that wasn't who she was. But it didn't mean that she wasn't then all of a sudden turning to the fully light side. She just didn't want to commit to the dark side, right? I was disappointed that it wasn't Darth Malgus because I thought at first when we first saw him, it was going to be Darth Malgus, but it was not. But I did really like how, we had the whole Avengers Infinity when she slayed him and he kind of drifts away, but it's almost artistic way in the way it was done. So I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a good story.
It was like he got erased.
Yes.
Kyle?
I think one of the things when you talk about the fact with the light and darkness with her, it's really reflected in the art style too, because in the beginning of this episode, she's trying to do more colors, but she can't. Everything's invaded by the darkness. And as she's in this battle and she realizes that she can't get rid of the dark, she has to accept the darkness that's within her, but it doesn't have to control her. And I think that's what puts her to this point where she has the dual lightsaber and she's able to use her colors and the full aspect of everything, because she's accepted that the darkness is a part of her, but the light side is good of her too. And I think it's a reflection of, it's just like everybody. Some days you're going to have good days, some days you're going to have bad days, and I think that's a reflection of that with her art style and her coming to acceptance of everything that is a part of her, and not just trying to withhold the darkness in her, because every time she tried to do that, to try to do light art with colors and everything, failed. It always turned dark again. So I think it was a really interesting reflection of that within the art and animation of the story as well.
And I also find it interesting that seemed to be a very reoccurring theme throughout this season. That there is no light without the darkness. There is no darkness without the light.
I don't know. I think that really only came up one other time this season.
I think there's a few times, but I think what it is there's a theme throughout these episodes where you have a couple with balance, but you also have a couple that just one reflects the dark side, one reflects the light side, and I think they were trying to kind of balance that a little bit.
Well, and it goes into some of what the things that the light side people do as well, right? So you can see that the people that are example, and I mean I don't want to skip around, but when we get to it, I'll shout them out. Where I feel that there's that reoccurring theme where, again, good people doing bad things and bad people doing good things.
Well, but see, I think that's different than the idea of the gray Jedi of walking the line. Just because you are good doesn't mean that you don't occasionally make mistakes. And just because you are bad doesn't mean that you don't occasionally do things that happen to also help other people. But the idea of, I am embracing both the dark and the light is what doesn't work for me, because, Kyle, you talked about the darkness not controlling her. Well, that to me means that she's not dark side. The dark side does control you. And if it's not controlling you, then you're not really part of the dark side.
I think that expression? Everybody's the villain in somebody's story.
Yeah. I think in this case, it's reflective of, for this character, is the fight she's having with the darkness inside of her. And again, that's reflected in her artwork, because like I said, when she's she's trying to fight against the darkness, but when she accepts that it's part of her too, then she finds a balance. And I think, that's one of the things, again, like Scott said, where these are kind of alternate stories within the reflection. One of the things that's always been is having balance. She's, by the end of this episode, you feel like she's found a balance between the fact that, yes, guess what? There's good in me, there's bad in me. I accept that balance. And it reflects with her having the dual colored lightsaber, because she's accepted that balance within her. And it's probably, if we were to get continuing details of this character, I would be betting this would be something she will be fighting for the entirety of her story arcs.
Yeah, and this is where I'm going to have to lean into Scott's point of this is an alternate universe and not, Star Wars as Lucas has envisioned it, because Star Wars as Lucas envisioned it, balance is not the dark side. It is not embracing both. It is forsaking the dark side and staying on the light. So, but
all right, well, let's move on to episode 2, lest we spend all of our podcast talking about episode 1. Episode 2 is, episode 2 is Screecher's Reach. A young girl out on an adventure with her friends discovers a legendary cave with a dark pull. I will go ahead and start out the discussion by saying this is my least favorite episode of this season of Vengeance, and it might be my least favorite episode of any Star Wars Visions, and possibly one of my least favorite Star Wars stories ever. It was well done. It was amazingly animated. It has excellent themes and very narrative, but it ended in such a depressing way that I was very mad that I had to watch it with a Star Wars label. To me, Star Wars always should end up with some kind of gem of hope, and this episode of Visions had zilch when it came to hope. It was very depressing to see what happened to this little girl, and it reminded me a bit of how certain objects or trends in the lives of our children can really lead them down a dark path and take advantage of them in ways that they don't always see coming. And for this kid, growing up in that whole sweatshop thing, she was doomed from the start almost. And it was really depressing, you guys. Now, again, it was very well made. The art was excellent. And I understand that the whole point of this narrative was that this kid is in a lot of trouble and is headed down the dark path. And I get that it's necessary for us to have stories like that, but I don't want Star Wars stories like that. And so it made me very depressed and sad. And I'm like, yeah, this is absolutely at the bottom of my list of this season of Visions, and possibly all of Visions in toto so far. All right, well, having kicked it off with such a sunshiny review, Kyle, what were your thoughts about Screecher's Reach?
So this one was interesting for me. Obviously, you have that Irish style of animation that we've seen in a lot of movies that have come out recently that have been very popular. I don't know if the animation style really fits for me for Star Wars. I liked the story. I thought the story was very intriguing. I'm going to be honest with you. Yes, it's a depressing ending, and we had a couple of them in season 1 of Visions that didn't exactly end on the best notes either. But what I think it's a reflection of here is that there's a line that her one friend tells her at the beginning of the episode where he's like, if you have an opportunity to get out of here, take it, no matter what it is. And that's what ends up happening. And it turns out that, yes, there was a setup in place because this girl had a Sith Lord had their eye on this girl to make her the apprentice. And yes, it's not the happiest of stories, but it's one of those stories too. It's where is the path that this young woman is choosing to take, is it still a better option than the one she had in front of her in this life where she was absolutely miserable, she was not going anywhere, and so on, and she has her one friend's encouragement to go no matter what. So I think it's interesting, and you also see how the dark side can manipulate here, where she has good intentions, but her intentions are leading her to the dark side. And one of the things that I really did like about this episode was at the end when we see the Sith Lord for the first time, how she just portrays this very friendly, almost initially like warmth, motherly kind of portrayal. And then we kind of see at the end where about leaving her as she's leaving her friends and her apprentice, and they can't come, where you see the attitude change, and it's very interesting. This is not one of my top ones in this season, but I can see why I know a lot of people did like this one a lot, and I think it is actually a very powerful story.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I'm not saying that it's not well done. It's very well done. I just hated it. Derek, what were your thoughts about Screecher's Reach?
So I actually like the ending because it wasn't happy. Again, I'm not someone who sits there and likes, depressing things and stuff like that, but I liked it that it told the side of why some people make the decisions that they do for that same exact reason. And for all we can theorize how this planet with all these kids are, working these sweatshops. Was it because, the adults left them to that? Or was it simple fact is, this is the things that Count Dooku talked about. The Jedi did not protect the people. The Jedi chose who to save and who not to save, right? So you don't know in the situation here where, yes, in most situations where you are in a position of that way, to exactly what Kyle made, you're going to pick that decision because at the end of the day, it may be bad things, but you're going to be you're going to survive. You're going to live on. And I think if you really put somebody in today's world, and you can't, I can't say that, but I can honestly say that there would be a good chunk of people that would rather do that. And I think that's the idea, that it is actually truly reflecting humanity. Right? It's not going to be all roses and unicorns and stuff like that. And, when people are pushed to the brink, people are going to make those types of decisions. And that's where I appreciate the story. I agree that animation style is not my favorite type of style. But overall, the story I thought was very well done because it kept it real.
Yeah, totally. And if this had been an X-Men story or a Star Trek story, I'm with you. I don't want Star Wars like this. Anyway, Nathan, what were your thoughts about Screecher's Reach?
All right. Well, you know how in The Sith I said, this one wasn't my cup of tea, but I'm not going to sit here and say that you guys are wrong for liking it. Scott, you're absolutely wrong. This is one of the best episodes of this season. In fact, I would rate it probably number 3, and of the ones that deal with characters that use the Force, number 1 from this season. So no spoilers on what my favorite 2 are. But they're the ones that don't involve the Force. I love this one. I love the animation style. I love the accents, if I can be quite frank there. I love that it was kind of a twist at the end because, with so many of these stories, the child learns they have Force powers and they go on to aspire to be a Jedi. And this one's like, no, she is going down a dark path. But I don't think all hope is lost. They didn't kill all of her friends. They can still reach out to her. If they can escape that planet somehow, we could have another story down the line. And I'm sure we won't because it's Visions and they do one-offs. But I can imagine a story down the line where her friends do make it off planet and they do reach her and they bring her back to the light and, make her realize that, that wasn't the only path. So I thought it was great. It's one of my top 3 from the season.
Yeah, and again, I'm not saying it was poorly done or that I hated the art style. That was all great. I just don't like this kind of topic when it comes to a Star Wars story.
Well, let's see. I'm just going to
have any
take a bite out of the extremely dark end of the chocolate.
That's right. No, I'm fine with villains being in the story, Derek. I don't want the story to end on such a down note. Even Empire Strikes Back and The Last Jedi had gems of hope within them. The whole point there was for that to be a downbeat in the story, but the overall theme of Star Wars is hope, and this episode had zilch.
I'm going to disagree with you there, Scott, because I think part of the point of this storyline was these children on the planet they were on, they had no hope at all. They knew what their fate was being on this planet. And even though she's going to the dark side, there's a sliver of hope for her because she's going to have a life that isn't necessarily completely predetermined by this planet, this dead end planet that they're on. And it's like, that's why her friend tells her, whatever your opportunity is to get off this planet, you have got to take it because you're destined for something more. Now, whether it's good or bad, that's a whole other thing. But I think there is a sense of hope in the aspect of this is somebody who's at least getting off of a dead end life and a dead end path.
But
she has a lot of passion.
False hope. Yes.
She has a lot of passion, and that passion gives her strength. And that strength
here we go.
breaks her chain. Wait a minute. Nope. I see Scott's point now.
See, that's what made it so much worse for me. And again, if you guys liked it, that's great. And yes, very well done art. And not just art style. I mean, it was there was pathos, there was drama. It was a very well done piece of entertainment. I don't think it belonged in a Star Wars universe. But hey, maybe I'll take solace in that it's an alternate universe.
That's what I did for the last
one. But it also makes you appreciate the others that do have hope then, Scott. Because if you know there's always hope, then you know it's always coming.
I suppose what this does is it makes me appreciate Qui-Gon Jinn even more because he was almost right down to the whole Irish/Scottish heritage thing. He was almost the light side mirror of this evil Sith lady that took this young slave and brought her on as an apprentice. But Qui-Gon, of course, did it for Anakin and, was the linchpin of the entire Skywalker saga, right?
And I'm sure it worked out great for Anakin. Never had any issues whatsoever.
Well, I mean, in one respect, he had a rough life, obviously. But in the end, he still ended up doing the right thing. And he didn't start out as Sith, he started out as
He
Jedi.
just killed millions of people in the meantime.
Details.
A few younglings here or there.
Eventually his sins were forgiven, right? That's all you're worried about.
That makes him great, right? You murder a few million people, but you feel sorry about it later. That's great.
Same thing with Luke Skywalker. I mean, he's the hero, but he killed millions of people on the Death Star.
He did blow up the Death Star. Yeah, that's true. Anyway, my point though was a meta commentary here. The evil Sith lady is almost like a banshee as a mythical creature in the cave there, and the animation house that did this was an Irish animation house, and of course the banshee is a creature of Irish mythology. So I really liked that aspect. That was a nice little, real world nod to mythology and all of the influence that mythology has had on Star Wars in general. So
and not just that too, Scott. You think about how the Sith lady was portrayed, assuming she was Sith. We're all assuming she was Sith.
Well, she had the Sith logo.
Definitely dark side.
Okay, I didn't catch the Sith logo on there. But anyways, but she's portrayed in the light, though. If you look at it, she's very white. She's very pretty, and it's whether you believe it, right? So exactly. I mean, I get it. Yes, the lies and deceit and what the dark side does, but that's how it's portrayed, right? So
and there was a kind of a Little Mermaid feel with the orphan girl and her necklace, and how the necklace was important about luring her into the dark deal, if you will. Again, I'm not saying it wasn't well done. It was very well done. I just was like, really, I hate you people.
All right. Well, before Scott turns to the dark side, perhaps we should move on to episode 3.
That was the whole plan, was to make me embrace my hate. No. All right. Anyway. All right. Episode 3, In the Stars. So, Kyle, I'll let you kick off the intro here.
So we have two sisters who are the last of their kind, fighting for survival when Imperial forces discover them. So I gotta say, with this episode, this is the first of what I call the kid warm the heart episodes, because there's several in this season of Visions where there really wasn't that too much in Vision season 1. With this episode, you kind of with the animation style that they do use, with the story they're trying to tell, this is a little bit more kid friendly, but it's still a good story for adults as well here too. I enjoyed this one. It was solid. I don't think it was anything that just completely blew me away, but I liked the story. I liked the concepts that they had in this, and I think it's always interesting to see when you see an indigenous people to a planet, seeing how they're affected when the Empire comes to their planet and rapes and pillages the resources of their planet.
Yeah, totally. Nathan, I got a little bit of a Captain Planet vibe here about the ecological impacts of the Empire, and it reminded me a lot of Nal Hutta in Star Wars: The Old Republic video game, where you see a lot of pollution, and you have some missions in the video game where you're trying to clean the rivers and help the wildlife there from all the weird chemical exposure from the Sith Empire and the Hutt cartels. So I think this had a very similar, atmosphere. And what did you think about that whole through line there, that whole theme?
This episode honestly kind of dragged on a little bit for me. I wasn't totally invested in it. And I think part of the reason why is because it was presented as these are the last two members of this species, which means their species is extinct. Pretty much. They have no way to repopulate.
Well, provided that they reproduce
in the
sexually.
normal fashion.
Yeah,
yes.
Maybe if
Maybe
they
they
reproduce
don't.
by budding, then they could be okay.
Then maybe.
Osmosis.
Osmosis.
Could be. But you talked about in the last one about having no hope. To me, this one kind of had no hope because even if they kick the Empire off the planet, what do they do then?
Yeah, the planet's still pretty wrecked.
They grow old and die. They have no medical care. No doctors around. So if they get sick, they're goners. Yeah. As long as you didn't think about it too much, this one was fine. But once I started thinking about the larger ramifications for what's going to happen with these two characters, yeah.
Or even the fact that when they free the water supply, it's going right into the big polluted area of of water.
Which dilutes the pollution, but doesn't make it go away.
Yeah. I think the only bright spot, if you'll pardon the pun, is right there in the title, and then the whole idea of our parents became those stars. And then you see the stars later show up in the sky, new stars. So yes, I think they are pretty well doomed. But they're, like I said, there's that one bright spot of how they believe that they're going to continue on as those stars. Derek, what did you think of In the Stars?
So the animation, the character design, the voice act, I mean, the way they did it, and even like the culture of the aliens and overall, I liked it a lot. But I'm with Nathan. This, to me, I was bored 5 minutes in, not even, probably 3 minutes in, because I knew exactly what was going to happen. Okay, the little one thinks she's ready. She's going to go do this. She's going to get in trouble. The older sister's going to have to save her. And, miraculously, so for whatever reason, they're force sensitive. And they're going to, she's going to find she has her inner power. And, and then to exactly Nathan's point, okay, now what? Like, there's a reason the Empire is there. If the base is destroyed, you think the Empire is just going to miraculously disappear? Like, they're going to come in and just completely wipe everything out now. Like, they just doomed their whole planet. Like, and I get that from a person, but it just, to me, it actually showed like how immature the girls were. And I found it very blah afterwards. Like, even like I said, during it and afterward, it was like, this was like some really cool animation, and I really liked that portion and where they were going with it. Like, I would have liked to know more about it pre this episode, like the prequel, which most of the time I don't say too much, but I like that. But outside of that, like, to me, this was definitely in the bottom third.
Yeah. You mentioned the predictability, and Kyle, you mentioned the child heartwarming thing. You're right that was absolutely a thing in this season. There are 5 episodes in which a child finds out that they have force powers. Granted, one of those is only heartwarming in the sense that in Screech's Reach, he will stab you in the heart with a lightsaber. But still, over half of the episodes were very predictable in that, there's a young child. Bet they're going to figure out they're force sensitive. And sure enough, they do.
Yeah. All right. Well, speaking of children-focused storylines, let's move on to episode 4. I am your mother. Kyle, what are your thoughts about this episode? We got young pilot Annie, embarrassed by her clingy mum, must team with her on a wild madcap academy race. Kyle, what you got?
Okay, it's Aardman. It's Wallace and Gromit. It's Chicken Run.
Yeah.
You're not going to go wrong here. This episode was everything I expected from it. It was fun. It was funny. I love to when I rewatch it and go back and there's that one booth, things that Luke touched.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Or the Hera poster in her bedroom. That was great.
Yes.
But this is the fun of Visions. This is when Visions is just sometimes they go to the right people and they find the right and they just have fun. And this is what you can get out of Visions. This by far was the one that put the biggest smile on my face and the one that I had the most fun with. But I knew that going in, and I just want to know, when are we going to all sign up for the Wedge Antilles Pilot Academy?
Now, right now.
Yeah. I really enjoyed this episode. It was, like you said, it was funny. The animation style was great with that almost quasi claymation look from the Wallace and Gromit crew. And just having Wedge be not only the guy in charge of the pilot academy, but also having him like selling his own like branded souvenirs and whatnot. That was so cool.
And being like a complete pompous ass too about it, right?
Yes.
Who should buy me?
I was
Legend.
there on both Death Stars, you know?
That's right.
So
Like, look how great I am. Derek, what were your overall thoughts? Did you like this one? I mean, obviously it was funny.
oh, this one to me is this season's Tatooine Rhapsody. Like, it is perfect. It's fun. I enjoyed it. You knew exactly what you're getting into. It is my third favorite out of the 9. It's just a lot of fun, and I really enjoyed it.
Excellent. Nathan, what were your thoughts about I Am Your Mother?
Number 1 favorite episode of this season. No buts about it. The absolute favorite. Of course, I love Wallace and Gromit, but I love British television in the first place.
Yay.
So that, Taskmaster.
We just all love Noel Fielding. That's all, plain and simple. So,
I mean,
the
no,
Mighty
it's
Boosh.
not bad, but I mean, Would I Lie to You? QI. I love a bunch of British stuff.
The IT crowd.
I realize I just named like the 3 most popular British shows ever, so it sounds like I'm just hitting the high points. But anyways, no, I love this one. Plus, you had a Wookiee tear somebody's arms off.
Yep.
How can I not love that?
I liked they used the Shurawuk moment to cover up a curse word too. That was great.
Yes. She's a real. Yes, exactly. Yeah, that was great. Oh man, it was fun the whole way through. No force powers, which
Nope.
Given what I just talked about with how 5 of them have a young child figuring out they have force powers, and 2 others have light and dark duality stuff. There's only 2 that didn't deal with the force, and this is one of them, and I appreciated that. It's very tempting. If you're a studio and you get told you get to work on a Star Wars thing, it is so tempting to jump straight to Jedi, because that's the only chance you're ever going to get to do that. I think it's so much more courageous to say, you know what? Yeah, we're doing Star Wars, but we're not going to bother talking about the Jedi at all. So I loved it for that reason as well.
All
Plus,
right, great.
I got a bunch of episode 1 vibes, very much like the pod race. It was great.
Oh, and I love the fact that the bad guy spaceship had the little teeny tiny Death Star laser
Yes.
thing.
Yeah.
as its secret weapon.
You can't hide in my blind spot forever.
But nobody said wizard, and I was disappointed in that, though.
Yeah, that was the right time for that to happen. Yeah.
Well, maybe that's what the Shurawuk word was.
She's a real wizard? Yeah, I don't think so. All right, cool. So, episode 5, Journey to the Dark Head. A hopeful mechanic and disillusioned Jedi team up for an unlikely quest to turn the tide of war. I really enjoyed this one. Very much a traditional anime style of animation going on. And the visuals were great as they go to the giant statues that involved that weird rainstorm prophecy kind of thing. I didn't quite grasp what the mechanic girl was hoping to achieve by destroying the dark head. Like, I know that she said she thought that could somehow prevent the dark side prophecies or something like that, but
Yeah.
I
So
didn't quite the whole thing there. I enjoyed the episode very much, and I loved the duel between our disillusioned Jedi friend and his his opposite number, who was all like, "You're gonna join the dark side." That was really cool. But yeah, I couldn't quite figure. I mean, I know she wants to destroy the dark head, but what does she hope that will actually change?
yeah, it took me a few minutes to figure that out too. But what it is they get these prophecies, and that they know, okay, we get light side prophecies and dark side prophecies. Good things are going to happen or bad things are going to happen, and they've realized that, okay, the bad side prophecies are coming from the dark head. So maybe if we stop those prophecies from being made, it will stop them from coming true.
Prophecy does not work that way.
I
Anyway.
agree. I think she's totally off base with that, but I understand what she's thinking.
Okay,
She's wrong,
all right.
but I
Yes,
understand what she's
now that
thinking.
you've explained it, I see what she was aiming to do, and I enjoy how it ended up showing her that, much like other Star Wars stories, there's a whole duality to it, and the light side thing started to change over to dark side, and the dark side thing started to change. They were all intertwined. We got some purple happening there. So I enjoyed this episode, and the animation was good. Kyle, what are your thoughts about episode number 5, Journey to the Dark Head?
This is in my top 3. I love this one. This one was pulled right from season 1. It would have fit in right in with that. I love the animation designs. I love the Sith Lord design in this one. But you were talking about the dark head statues and along those things. I think that this is the other theme that's really running through every episode of this season of Visions is acceptance of a situation and what it is. In Sith, we see it with her accepting the darkness that's within her. In Screecher's Reach, her the young girl realizing the decision she has to make to get off the planet. In the Stars, the older sister accepting that some of the things the younger sister believes. I am your mother. Obviously the daughter accepting the mother for who she is. And here it's finding the balance of, you know what? Hey, and she realizes it when she sees it. The light and dark go between both statues. It's not one is dark, it runs through everything, and I think that's it's the aspect of the forces and everything. It's which direction does it go in. It's not a clear cut decision, but this one too, I think had one of the best fight scenes in it. This is one of those ones too for me that I would love to revisit these characters because I love the 2 protagonists in this episode. I think they're very interesting, and I love how they have that like banter between them as far as kind of just poking at each other, but you sense there's something more by the end of this short. But I think it was beautifully animated. I think it was incredible fight sequences, and like I said, this is one of those ones that I hope somewhere down the line when we have a 3rd or 4th season of Visions, they choose, okay, we're going to revisit the more popular and return to those worlds. I would love to see them do that a little bit later on down the line in a season of Visions.
Yeah. Derek, there was even a big ring connecting the 2 heads to kind of really drive home the interconnected nature of it all. What did you think about this episode, the big fights up there on top of the statues and all that?
So I don't know if it's ironic that this is the 5th episode, and it's my favorite. Like last season's The Ninth Jedi was my favorite, and that was the 5th episode. And it's ironic that it's the middle out of 9 episodes. So I don't know. Is it all interconnected some way? So, and to even echo Kyle's piece, you could almost feel like this universe that this episode was taking place in is that it could almost be in the same universe as the Ninth Jedi. Now, I know in the Ninth Jedi, it was very, the Jedi had quote unquote been extinct and all that. So maybe this is the prequel to what the Ninth Jedi universe ended up being, right? Because they did talk about how the dark side was winning, right? And then that the light side was getting desperate in their measures. And I mean, at the end, they found out, yes, they're without the dark, there is no light. And without light, there is no dark. So, very much, the way that the universes are connected. But yeah, I mean, just overall, and again, I applaud this overall season for the different animation styles. And it wasn't like I picked this one because it was the traditional Japanese anime style or anything compared to the other 8 episodes. It just happened to be what I thought was the most interesting story, the most, overall, balanced artwork. Even though it wasn't my favorite episode, I thought was the most best in artwork. I think there's quite a few that were better when it came to the animation piece. But just overall, I really liked it. It almost kind of felt that Avatar or Naruto type of storyline characters. When you have like the Sith, he's got like this scorpion, shuriken type deal thing, spear that he's running around, and just overall the plot and the way we're going to the point where you did have some comedy involved with it. And overall, like I said, just this is my favorite episode.
Real quick, too, I just want to say, you feel like more of the Ninth Jedi in that world, Derek? You know what world it felt like it fit into was actually from the Elder episode, which was episode 7 in season 1. It felt like it could have fit into that very easily.
Possibly too. I wouldn't say no. Yeah, I could see that very well too. Very crossover from multiple episodes in season 1.
Yeah. Nathan, did you have anything else you wanted to add about Journey to the Dark Head?
I was not as enamored with this one as these two guys were. I didn't hate it. I just didn't really enjoy it as much. I think you're right, Scott, that it didn't make a whole lot of sense. My first thought was, even if you succeed in this, all you're actually going to do is stop yourself from receiving prophecies about the dark side. That's not going to stop them from actually coming to pass. The premise was a little off for me. I do think that this one handled the whole duality, dark side and light side being interconnected better than the first episode with the Sith, because it wasn't, I am a person who embraces both the dark and the light. It was more of on a cosmic scale. The dark exists and the light exists, and nothing any one person can do is going to stop that fact from being a fact.
Right. Okay, great. All right, let's move on to episode 6, The Spy Dancer. I really liked this one. It's probably my second favorite one in season 2. The premier dancer at an Imperial-frequented cabaret is tested when her identity is compromised. I loved all of the nods to the film, the story Cabaret in this one. I love when they do a rebellion story fighting against the Empire that leans into that French resistance feel from World War II. And this absolutely did that, right down to the style of artwork and the Art Deco designs. And of course, the animation here and the artistry was just beautiful. And then for me, the reveal at the end where we find out that the main character's son is probably that dude who I at first thought was going to be Director Krennic, I won't lie, because he was accompanied by a K2 droid and he was wearing that outfit. And she thinks that he is the Imperial commander that had raided her village earlier in her life and goes to make an attack and then suddenly realizes that is not the officer that I thought it was. And the eye patch thing to cover up his mismatched colored eyes was the perfect icing on the cake to me artistically, because it emphasized the Imperial idea of, purity, and how if you have mismatched eyes, you would not be considered pure by their standards. So I thought it was great. Kyle, what did you think?
This one was the biggest surprise for me and how much I liked it, because I wasn't sure, coming from France, I wasn't sure what they were going to do, but I love the story. I love the characters. This is another one I hope we could get a chance to revisit. You're talking about how he was wearing the eye patch. Not only was he wearing the eye patch, if you look closely, he had the little horns removed. They were gone. And it just another reflection of what he's been through. But I love this because it did have that World War II resistance kind of feel and rebellion kind of feel. And again, another one without force use, per se. I mean, maybe there's some force running through our main character, but it was mostly her own skill and what she taught. And I love the fact too that you even got some of the other side characters enough to bait you into wanting to know more about these characters, like her kind of her Padawan, the one she obviously had been teaching and stuff like that, and the guy who was kind of the mechanic and the one building all the really looks like he built a starship out of Imperial starship spare parts.
Yes.
But yeah,
it was really good.
This one I'm gonna say is in my top 3, and it was probably, like I said, the biggest joyful surprise of this season of Visions.
Yeah, totally. Nathan, what did you think about this very, very French episode?
Well, I mentioned earlier that my favorite ones were the ones where we don't have Force users, and this is the other one where we don't have a Force user, or at least not an obvious Force user. Perhaps some of the jumps, may have been Force aided, but I don't think so. I choose to believe, whether it was intended or not, that there's no Force use in this episode at all, which again, I think is a really bold choice. Y'all have talked about the very Frenchness of it and the World War II aspect of it, which I think fits in perfectly with the original Star Wars. A lot of the original Star Wars trilogy was based largely on World War II and various World War II era movies. That's to say, movies about the World War II era, not movies that were made in that era. So I think that fit in perfectly. I love the twist of, her vengeance, the dancer's vengeance, was taking the best of her, almost to the point where she killed her own son. But then at the last moment, she realized, oh gosh, no, that is wrong. That, this is not who I thought it was. She saw the darkness, and for a brief moment, she thought she could stop it. And right, no, that was Luke in The Last Jedi. But yeah, I thought this one was great. It's my second favorite. I didn't enjoy it as much as I Am Your Mother, but in a sense, I think it was better art than I Am Your Mother was.
One thing with this episode too, I think for the first time we really truly saw just how powerful those security droids are.
Yeah, because we see them often, and not just the K2SOs, but the droids in general. We see them going up against Jedi, and they fall like tissue paper. But when they're up against people who don't have the Force and lightsabers, they're a lot more imposing.
They're the Terminator.
Exactly. The scene where they had cut that one in half and he still kept coming. He will not stop. Yeah, absolutely. The Terminator. Derek, what were your thoughts about the spy dancer?
Yeah, I love this. I'm with the others. I think this was in my top 3. Whether it was better than I Am Your Mother or not, kind of flip-flops a little bit back and forth. Because the one thing I really liked about this one is that it takes me back to, and again, it's the art style, but just the way they pieced everything together in the universe. It reminded me very much of the 90s cartoon movies that we used to watch, like Fiefel's American Tail or Fiefel Goes West. What was the one I can't think of that just popped up on Disney that just escaped my brain? Oliver. Not that one. Oliver's Twists.
Oliver and
Company.
Oliver and Company. Yeah, where it's just like the world was grungy, right? It wasn't a clean, spit shine, where it was there, but it wasn't like pollution filled like we had in Bright Star. It was just, the art style and what it was, and everyday real life. And here's the people putting on a happy face, too, like we talked about, but behind the scenes, they were trying to figure out how they could rebel. And again, it's perfect when you don't have to have everything Force related, when it's dealing with the common person and you can relate to that, right? Or it retells a bit of history, right? And overall, once I knew it wasn't the guy, I knew it was the child. I knew it at that point, right? As soon as I saw the eye patch and all that, so I figured that out. But I did like that twist. I did like it that, okay, here it is. Here's the, all the things that, we've had in previous stories of the way they've done things, when a child is taken away and it's raised by the enemy, right? And that is like, you really want to know, okay, the way it ended, yes, there's hope for Scott, but you want to know what happens, right? You want to see these characters, they escaped, they got away. It's kind of like the way Andor season 1 ended, right?
Yes.
There's still the bad guys out there, and there's still things, but they got away, and they live to fight another day. But you want to see them and how the story unveils. Does she finally reunite? Does he turn to the resistance, or does he become, whatever? Is he part that helps, Urso put a wrench in the Death Star, right? You don't know, but it's good enough storytelling, and it's a really interesting style of art. And again, I thought it was one of my top 3.
Yeah, and for that spark of hope, Scott, the very last scene, we see that on his thing, he's got the tracker. And we don't know if he noticed it and chose to leave it there, or if he just didn't notice it. But she knows where he is.
Yeah. Yep. It's great. Good stuff. Nathan, lead us into episode 7, The Bandits of Golak.
The Bandits of Golak, pursued by the Empire, a boy and his Force-sensitive younger sister seek refuge at a vibrant... I don't know how to pronounce the last word.
Daba.
Yes, that. So this one is a train one.
Mm-hmm.
At least they start off on a train, and we find out very early that the younger sister has Force powers. So that makes it a little bit different than some of the others, because she actually knows how to use the Force. I don't know that she knows what the Force is, though. I don't think they ever made that clear. I think she just knows that she has the ability to move things, with her mind. So this is set in the Imperial era, as was the Spy Dancer, which I think is interesting because a lot of these you can't tell, or they're obviously not in the Imperial era. So it was neat to see the Inquisitors towards the end. Kyle, you and I were talking earlier about this one and about how you could tell where this one had come from. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
I think outside of the second episode, Screech's Reach, this one represents more. You feel the ethnic background of this episode, and you see where it comes from and how they incorporate their own culture into this episode. Which, that's the one thing I don't necessarily think you got a lot out of in prior episodes of Visions, here and there, but this one you really feel them incorporating their own culture into Star Wars. And I think that was one of the big goals of Star Wars Visions, was to get other cultures feel into Star Wars. And I think this one, of all the ones that we have in this episode, in this season, probably reflects that the most. I think it's beautifully computer animated. I think it's some of the sharpest computer animation I've seen in the Visions episode. I think my only real issue with this was I also felt like, okay, I'm watching Star Wars meets Aladdin a little bit, and it's just because of how the older brother came across, and being the thief and all of that kind of thing. And that was kind of just like, I wish they could have went in a little bit different direction. But I like the aspect that the girl has Force powers, but she doesn't understand what she has, and she's just a kid having fun with them. And getting into mischief because that's what she knows. She's a thief. That's what she knows. But like I said, I think this is, as far as, I mean, this felt like it could have been a video game with the how sharp it looked. And yeah. I think it's one of the more solid entries of this. Is it my favorite episode of this season of Star Wars Vision? No, but it's definitely not a disappointment either.
Yeah, I agree completely with Kyle. It's very middle of the road for me. I enjoyed it. I thought that we were going to go in a slightly different direction, and that when the little girl and her brother arrived at the Daba, that it was going to be like everybody there had the Force in some different gift, and they were going to be like a freak show, a collection of misfits or whatever, and she was going to hide out there from the Inquisitors and use the Force as like circus tricks, if you will. It didn't really go that way, and that was fine. And then I did love the very much old school Ming the Merciless look of that particular Inquisitor that showed up with his greenish hued skin. And I like, and my headcanon is that for that society, when you get corrupted by the dark side, instead of the creepy yellow eyes, your skin starts to turn more and more green. So since he was all very dark side, he was very green. At least that's how I was viewing it. So it was just a pretty good episode. Derek, what did you think of this one?
So, yeah, as we were talking earlier before the show, like to me, this you could definitely tell was produced and made by an animation studio in India. They completely adapted their culture to it. So, for example, the Inquisitor from the perception of what maybe if this was in a India influence would be, because they are dark wizards and all that stuff. He's a djinn. He looks exactly like a djinn. And then the fact that then the old crone, the lady, as they have the wise mothers of how the Indian culture represents and what the grandmothers and do, and she's the one that's the Jedi, right? And you could tell from her whole jewelry pieces on her face and the way she is, like you knew. As soon as the Inquisitor came up, and then they're looking for someone and who's doing it right. And then again, back to the fight style, the animation, it was totally, again, I use the word Bollywood. I mean, it's definitely over the top and very, of what their style of fighting that they do in the movies today. And you can tell the Middle Eastern influences and all that stuff with the whole bandits and doing like, the whole train, the train ride and what they're doing, the train heist, and just everything that was going on with it. It fit it very well. And like I said, it's in the bottom half for me overall. Just because, again, from a story piece and what I could do. I personally, actually, Kyle, I think the animation was not that good of CGI. I thought it was a little shoddy. Not as clear and crystal or clean as you could definitely tell that I think I've seen from others. But again, I give it pure kudos because I could tell it was very influenced by the team that made it. It was them telling their version of Star Wars, and I really like that. So, like I said, I enjoyed it, and I could definitely watch it again. And like I said, I was super excited that again you could see Star Wars embraced by non-Americans, and it was great.
Guys, can I interrupt for a second? Because there's something we haven't talked about yet that I want to address. There's some pretty famous people who did voice acting for this. I've been going through IMDb while we've been doing this. Dennis Lawson actually voiced Wedge Antilles.
That's cool. I didn't know that.
Short. But I know we have, in one of the episodes upcoming, we have Daveed Diggs. But in Screecher's Reach, the voice of the Sith Mother was Angelica Houston.
Wow.
So they pulled some pretty big names to do this. They did that with season 1 and 2, where they did a lot of famous voice actors, and we have that again in this season. Steve Bloom does some voice, Matthew Wood does some voices, some other ones, but they got a few big stars also to come in and do some voices for this season. And I just wanted to take a minute to bring that up before we got any further.
Yeah. That's always a good sign that, this project has a lot of prestige. So not just because it's very artistic, but also, it's Star Wars and people want to be involved and they want to support their country folk, as it were, when it comes to making these Star Wars shorts from those studios that don't normally get to do Star Wars type projects.
Yeah.
All right. So episode 8, The Pit. A young prisoner forced to dig for Kuiper by the Empire plans an escape for he and his people. I really enjoyed this episode. It definitely did not end the way that I was expecting it to, but it certainly ended with a spark of hope, so I was very pleased. It vaguely reminded me of the pit sections of The Dark Knight, where you constantly see people trying to plan some sort of escape route from the pit run by Ra's al Ghul and the League of Assassins, League of Shadows, League of Assassins. Those guys. And then, you saw our protagonist finally pulls off the escape after the Empire has left them all to rot at the bottom of the pit. What a bunch of scumbags. And he gets to the city and tells everybody what's up and then ends up meeting his doom. But the people still come anyway. Now, when the rain started, I thought it was going to end with the hole fills with water and the slaves thought that they were doomed, but instead that ends up being them rising up with the water and basically swimming out. But that didn't happen. Instead, we actually saw the populace turn from their wicked ways, if you will, and actually stop and help these people after they realized that their whole society is kind of built on slave labor at that moment in time. And then I was thinking, gosh, it's pretty dark, though, that the guy actually does die. And, you know, it looked for a while there that his people were doomed as well. But the end where you see that he had left his mark by tagging that rock was just great to me. I really enjoyed this one. It's probably in my top 4 for this season because just it, even though it's very bleak, and like even the color palette is very bleak. I enjoyed the way that it ended, that he really did make a difference by changing the minds and alerting the people in the city to the problem of the worker class. Nathan, what did you think of episode 8, The Pit?
So the last 2 both deal with kyber crystals, but this one, they're kind of ancillary. You know, they're a reason why they're down in the pit in the first place, because they were mining the kyber crystals. Which reminds me, I should eat some kyber candy. This one wasn't bad. I don't think I would list it as one of my favorites. I do like that he was able to inspire the people to rise up and do something really more removing their ignorance than anything, because I really got the impression that they had no idea that this pit was out there. But then that made me question, does nobody in the city ever go anywhere? Like, the pit is not far from the city. And they just never go that direction, I guess. But then again, maybe why would you? Because you've got starships. If there's no other cities to go to, maybe you wouldn't go that direction. But I don't know.
A bourgeoisie who is so distracted by their pleasure that they don't notice the slave class, you don't say.
I don't say. You say.
You can also tell there's giant walls, right? So what goes beyond the walls? Why go out? So they're blocking what they're not looking for.
That side of the city, a strong empire presence. So.
Yeah, saying you might not want to go this way. Why not? Well, I have a blaster. Well, what does that have to do with anything? Try it and find out.
Derek, what did you think of episode 8, The Pit?
So you could definitely tell this was the one that was produced from Africa. You know, you've already touched on it, right? It's a bit of unfortunate history and the way things are, right? And it is a story into some relation to modern times right now. And I thought, you know, animation was clean. It definitely, the style kind of made me feel like a little bit of the Boondocks. For some of you that might be aware of what that show is. And it kind of had the same commentary with it, right? Now, granted, it did have a happier ending, right? But unfortunately, the one voice that goes to change the other people's minds, unfortunately, is the voice that usually has to sacrifice themselves for the better of everyone else. So again, it's just that whole commentary of our history in the real world. And again, I thought it was a really great story. You know, but again, was it really Star Wars? I mean, I'm not saying it was. I mean, the only real thing you had that related back to Star Wars was really just the Empire, a couple of scenes with the stormtroopers and the kyber crystals. But again, I'm happy they were able to bring their story to the Star Wars universe, and it, you know, and it did show a really good sign of hope, right? There is hope for those that are willing to listen.
Yeah,
you know,
totally.
You mentioned the kyber crystals, and it just kind of dawned on me that I think it detracted from this episode that in the end the little girl got the reaction from the Kyber crystal. Because that brought it back to, oh, by the way, we got to make sure that we get Jedi in here.
I was going to ask Nathan, does this one count as a somebody who discovers force powers? Because it was like that, it's blink and you miss it.
It does, but I don't feel like that added to the story.
Yeah, I agree.
And
it's like Broom Boy all over again.
Well, no, but Broom Boy had a point. Like the reason they showed Broom Boy was to show that there are other Force users in the galaxy. This one is like she had a story beyond that, and then they just kind of tacked on oh, by the way, she can use Force.
Yeah, Broom Boy had the Force going for lots of different reasons, and he was important as the whole thing. Kyle, what did you think of episode 8?
The story was powerful. I'm gonna be honest with you. I think it's one of the episodes here that it was there for me, and I'm not saying it wasn't bad, but it was very trope filled. You had the whole idea of the pit and like you said, kind of the Dark Knight thing. You kind of knew that this character probably realized that this was something he wasn't going to come back from, and accepted that. I think it was very predictable, and I think that I would have liked to have seen them do something a little different, but I understand where they're coming from in the story they're telling because of where it's coming from, and I think that's just as important. Daveed Diggs was the voice of the main character in this episode as well, so you get a little bit of star power going on with there. This is I think Derek kind of described it too when he was talking about the animation. This was just a clean episode. It wasn't a bad episode, but it wasn't like, oh my gosh, there's something about this that makes it really, really stand out compared to some of the other episodes in this season of Visions. But again, there was no bad. I can honestly say I truly do believe in this season of Visions there was no bad episodes or episodes that I wouldn't revisit. I just think this is one of the ones that if I was going to watch Visions again, I probably would not go right to this one to watch. There's several episodes I think of this season that I would prefer to watch over the pit.
Yeah,
I would say there's no episode that I wouldn't rewatch in this season, but this episode is not one of the reasons I would go back to rewatch this season.
Yeah, I agree.
Correct.
I would not. Yeah. Okay, all right.
Unfortunately, it's the most American version.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, we're going to bring it on home with the final one, episode 9, Au's song. Derek, what did you think of episode 9?
So, again, right before we had aired, the one thing I loved about this season was that there were so many different kind of topics you could talk about, and questions you could say, okay, what was your favorite, visual? What was your favorite story? What was your favorite voice acting? What was your favorite music and all this stuff? And probably we would all come up with our very own different answer for each different question. Like, I don't think you could say like episode 5 met the criteria of all 3 of these, out of 4 questions or 5 questions. Like, there would be one predominant, you may say this is your favorite, but if I was to say, but which one did you like this topic better, you probably would give me a different one. So for me, this to me was the pinnacle of all of the episodes this season in regards to the beautiful animation. I thought it trumped everything when it came to that. Now, story-wise and everything else, yeah, it was pretty standard. It did deal with some Force, but at least it wasn't like she had to be a Jedi. She just was Force sensitive. Right? She doesn't necessarily mean she was going to be trained in the Jedi ways, even though, the Jedi Knights or Master took her with her. But it was really just to say, I need to hone your powers to help heal, right? It doesn't mean that you're going to be a great Jedi or whatever down the line. It's just, let's see what we can do to help save the world, where she could have just been a somewhat normal person. And you don't have to be a Jedi Knight to save the world. You can be a normal person. You just have to use your personal gifts. So again, I thought the story was really beautiful. I love the father-daughter moment. So again, as a recent father, of going on 4 years now, it touched my heart a bit there. And then just overall, like I said, just beautiful animation pieces and some pretty solid music background.
Yeah, totally. This is my favorite episode of season 2. I love the almost Build-A-Bear style of animation of the stitched together people. I like the overall atmosphere of this is a civilization that is people living in the Andes, if you will, and the mining of the kyber crystal. But then the crystal got corrupted. It was the only one to essentially have an opening crawl. I know it didn't crawl, but it was basically a crawl, which I love when there's a Star Wars story with a crawl. And then, people like to say that John Williams and his soundtrack for Star Wars is Star Wars Oxygen, right? There was a whole podcast with that title about the importance of music when it comes to soundtracks for Star Wars and why that is such a big chunk of what makes Star Wars so iconic. So I love this idea that now there's a literal importance of music because the young girl is using her voice and her gift of music, if you will, her gift of force-powered music to purify these kyber crystals and then affect everything around her. I love when there's a Star Wars story where someone interacts with the Force in a new and unique way. And this auditory or musical Force interaction is just great. I'm so happy to see the universe of Star Wars be expanded in this way, to talk about how the Force affects everything, especially when it comes to creative energies. And what more creative than singing, than using our voices, using our gifts of music to interpret or interact with our world. So yeah, oh man, I was all about it. This is one of the ones that I will go back and watch again. Nathan, what did you think of episode 9?
All right. Well, to Derek's point about how we can all have differences of opinion, and that's a great thing about Visions is different ones can appeal to us differently. This one is not one of my favorites. It's not one of my least favorites either. But I can totally understand why it's one of your favorites. Even though not all of it spoke to me the same way, I can see what did speak to you. And part of that is I'm not a musician in any way, shape, or form. I am really, really bad when it comes to music. I sing in my car alone when no one can hear me.
The rest of us are grateful for that.
Yeah, as a mercy to the ears of everyone in the world, I try not to sing where other people can hear me. So the idea that music connected her to these crystals through the Force is something that I can understand on an intellectual level, but is something that is never going to resonate, to use a music term there, with me on a personal level. So
this episode fell tone deaf to you. That is what you're saying.
It fell flat.
No,
Derek was right
no,
there.
It fell flat.
I was tone deaf to this episode. So for all those reasons, it didn't connect to me as much. Although I loved the, as you put it, the Build-A-Bear style. I thought that was an awesome thing. Season 1, for some of the great heights that it hit, did have a lot of sameness in the animation styles. I mean, there were differences, but it all kind of skewed one direction. This was something totally different. And I applaud them for going out and doing something that's very unique. If you see a scene from this episode, it's from this episode, regardless of what the scene is, just because of the style. So I do love that about this one.
Nathan, did you at least appreciate the idea that the whole sonic force was kind of a new thing? Like, I can't think of another Star Wars story that dealt with the Force in that way.
The closest thing I can think of relating, this isn't even all that close, but relating sound to Force was Obi-Wan doing the Krayt Dragon howl. In the very first movie to scare off the Tusken Raiders. But that wasn't really a connection through the Force. That was him using the Force to generate a sound. Or to amplify a sound.
Did the Dark Witches have anything to do with it or no? I can't remember if they did.
I was trying to think of that too. If the Witches of Dathomir used some sort of
I don't think they ever used any sort of sonic thing. But the sonic idea particularly makes sense with crystals because they have the harmonic resonance stuff, music, sound sound waves, frequencies,
Yes.
yada,
There you
yada,
go.
yada. Things that I totally understand.
Yes. All right, Kyle, bring us on home. Close it out for us. Episode 9. What are your thoughts?
This was one of the best episodes of this season. It hit on so many notes perfectly. The Build-A-Bear design of the characters, the animation makes it great for the kids. You've got this great character in Owl and what her ability is to heal these kyber crystals. You make a connection with these characters in this because of just how they look, how the story is heartwarming and feels to you. And let's look at it. It's the exact opposite of Screecher's Reach, where you have the young child going with the Jedi to go heal and be on the side of good, and not necessarily, and just exploring what she's capable of. But in the meantime, she's getting to explore the universe and get away from a place that probably would have been her only opportunity to travel away from her home planet, even though it didn't necessarily be what she wanted. But she realized she needed to do this, and I think this is, if you go back and watch season 1 of Visions, the final episode of season 1 of Visions ends on kind of a dark note, and this one ends with making you feel good, and you're in a great place. And I really think this episode truly does represent everything that was this season of Visions.
Yeah, totally. All right. Well, overall thoughts, guys. For me, I was very happy that we got a season 2 of Visions. I love this idea of a Star Wars project, very artistic and very different and creative than what we normally would have gotten from a Star Wars production. It almost feels like somebody took a Star Wars comic series of anthology stories and brought it to life in animation, which is so cool. Nathan, any other overall thoughts?
Yeah, so there's a couple of episodes in season 1 that I skip on a rewatch, and I don't think there's going to be anything in season 2 that's like that. So it didn't quite go to some of the lows that season 1 had. At the same time, there's a couple of episodes in season 1, The Jewel and The Ninth Jedi, that we still talk about on a regular basis on the podcast. And as much as I love the I Am Your Mother episode, I don't think we're going to be talking about that episode or any of the other episodes from season 2 years from now, unless we're like specifically doing a retrospective of, oh yeah, let's talk about Visions. It's not going to just come up. So I don't know if that means that overall it's better because there wasn't anything that stood out as being not good, or if it's not as good because there wasn't anything that quite reached the highs of season 1. I think maybe it averages out to be about the same, just different.
Yeah. Derek, final thoughts.
I mean, exactly what Nathan was saying. Like the average was low, right? But if you look at the median between season 1, there's a huger gap, right? So, but overall, I mean, again, I love it. I could watch, them do all sorts of stuff because again, the more Star Wars, the better. It's making it, very inclusive to everyone again, because Star Wars is something that's not just American or Hollywood related. It is something that everyone can enjoy. And I like to see that, what people can do. And I agree with what Kyle said. I still feel like there's probably a couple pieces or storylines from here that I'd be okay with if they did expand upon it, right? I really still hope at some point, besides the Duel or the Ronin that we get from season 1, that we got a comic book. I still hope that we do get whether it's through season 3 or season 4 of Visions, or it's its own standalone movie or short series, limited series of The Ninth Jedi. But I'd be okay if one of the Star Wars movies that Kathleen Kennedy came out and said that we're going to get I am there, but a whole Star Wars universe to that, I'd be okay with that. I'm fine with that, right? Because it's something that I know that I feel like we could all enjoy, have a good time with, and that's fine, right? It doesn't have to all be connected to the Skywalker saga.
Yeah, totally. Kyle, any more things to add?
Yeah, I'm putting this out there as a plea to the creators of Star Wars and the people who are writing it now. now, and I'm talking about the creative as a whole, because the amazing thing to me about Visions is that you're giving other people a chance to play outside of the sandbox. They're not having to deal with the Skywalker saga. They're not having to deal with necessarily all the history of Star Wars. They're just telling stories of Star Wars. And I think that's what makes me so excited about a new season of Visions, is because seeing these different stories, seeing these different views of Star Wars, seeing how it's interpreted by other countries and what they can do with it. And I think that's to me that is one of the biggest problems with our main produced Star Wars things right now, is they've kind of gotten into this rut. And I really think they need to take turn their eyes onto what Star Wars Vision is in getting outside of the box, trying different things, getting us different storylines, because it can work, and it works beautifully with several of these episodes here and in several episodes of season 1. Now, obviously, these are animated. You have a lot more fluidity and things you can do with animation, but get inspiration from this, because this is what I think a lot of fans right now want from Star Wars. They want something different. They want to expand their universe out and see beyond the scope that we've been fed now for 40 plus years. They want to see more of this universe. And Visions, I'm an animation fan anyway. I'm a huge anime fan, so season 1 was great. This season really surprised me. I was a little kind of bummed when they said it was going to be more from across the country, because I'm not necessarily a fan of every style that's out there, but again, this surprised me, and I think that I really hope we do get a season 3 of Vision, because I think it's a great project for Star Wars, and I think it really expands the horizons of Star Wars more than anything else that's going on in the Star Wars universe right now. And I think that's very important, that we do find ways to expand those horizons, and maybe even give some inspiration for our live action, whether it's movies or TV, to get more outside the box and take bigger risks, because I think that's something that they need to do with Star Wars right now, is take those risks, not be afraid to get outside of the Skywalker saga box, because it's such a vibrant world with a vibrant history that you can pull from, and they need to take the opportunity to do it.
Yeah, they need to take some risks. But you know what isn't risky? It's Derek's favorite part of the podcast, and that is, what T-shirts of Star Wars are we wearing this week? I'm going to go first, because I got a cool shirt when my family took a trip down to Savannah, Georgia for vacation last weekend. I actually found a Star Wars related pirate T-shirt. Let me see if I can stand up so you guys can see the back of my shirt here.
All right, so we are seeing. I can barely tell what that is, other than a piratey thing. I can't tell why
Come
it's
to the
Star Wars.
dark side. It's more fun here, Savannah, Georgia.
Yes, and it is come to the dark side, because it's going for the R thing of the pirate. And so the joke, of course, being that he's a Star Wars-y pirate. I was expecting some sort of joke about we have cookies, but it makes more sense for him to say we have more fun. Although he could have also said, come to the dark side, we have more rum.
Yeah. Or we have more booty.
Yes. Yes. So yeah, I was very pleased to see in a tchotchke shop of touristy trap stuff at the beach there in Savannah that there was a Star Wars joke on a shirt. So I'm like, oh, I have to get this, and then I can wear it on the podcast. Kyle, you've got the most appropriate T-shirt this week for the Visions episode.
Yes, I knew we were doing Visions, so I went back from when season 1 came out and put on my Star Wars Visions shirt, where Visions is written in the Japanese kanji, and so I just felt, it's appropriate. We're talking Visions. I need to wear the appropriate gear. Just one of the many fun things about Visions too. I want to throw out real quick while we're talking about shirts too. There's a great Star Wars Visions hardcover book out there that kind of gives a lot about behind the scenes in season 1 of Visions. It's on sale right now on Amazon. It's normally like a $50 hardcover book, and it's on sale for about $30. If you like Star Wars Visions, it's worth a check out.
Cool. Nathan, what Star Wars shirt do you have on?
Well, this is my third goodie of the week, because for May the 4th, I went onto Her Universe and purchased some Star Wars shirts. You'll see another one next time we podcast, but this is a Chewbacca shirt. It says You big walking carpet.
Yes, and it's got Chewie in a classic Marvel comic style in a big circle there, and of course Chewie has a speech balloon that says,
which roughly translates into sorry,
wizard.
can't say that on this episode.
It translates to wizard. Derek, I'm assuming you're not wearing any Star Wars threads, or even if you are, we won't be able to see them, so you get a pass.
That would have been pretty cool if I was, though, wasn't it? Like, how much of a nerd would I have been?
Right? That would have been amazing.
I mean, it's not that I didn't bring a Star Wars. I do have one in my luggage in my backseat of my car. It is my typical sleep shirt where it says "Not today," and it's my AT-AT that's half fallen over and ready for sleep. But unfortunately, yes, it's not something that was work appropriate. As I'm still wearing my work attire from visiting the office today in Detroit. So, yeah, no, I am in a rental X-wing. So yeah, I don't have my threads with me or my overall cape closet either. So
cape closet, that's right, cape closet. Yeah. All right. Well, if you guys out there listening to the show want to get a cool "What a Piece of Junk" t-shirt or mouse pad or coffee mug or any other of the Fandom Podcast Network shows merchandise, please head over to tpublic.com and search up Fandom Podcast Network, and you can find all sorts of excellent merch. Mr. Miracle, please let people know where they can find the show out there on the interwebs.
You can find the show in pretty much anywhere you get your podcast: Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Podbean, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Play, YouTube. Please like, subscribe, leave a comment, do all the algorithm things. You can also find us on Facebook, What a Piece of Junk, a Star Wars podcast. Derek runs that. Or you can reach out to Scott at whatapieceofjunkpod@gmail.com. If you want to talk to any of the rest of us through email, well, he'll let us know. On Twitter, we're at What Wars. Kevin will be running that. And then we have the Fandom Podcast Network Instagram, which is for the entirety of the Fandom Podcast Network, not just What a Piece of Junk. And if you do listen to us on Apple Podcasts or anything that allows you to leave a review, we would love for you to leave us a review. And Derek, why would we love for people to leave us reviews?
So if you're like me and you travel a lot, or if you have to commute to work still at some point, whether it's every day or a hybrid schedule, or you just like to listen to podcasts while you're working at home, whatever it might be, for your pleasure, your best bet to do is upon listening, streaming, downloading us, is to leave those reviews, because when you leave us the better positive 5-star reviews of any type, then what happens is the algorithm, that is the mighty interwebs, will put us at the top. And we enjoy doing this for fun, and it's not something we're doing for the cash flow, because honestly, there is no cash flow. Kyle can attest to that. But at the end of the day,
I have this Cayman bank account that you guys don't know about. Oh, wait, I wasn't supposed to say that. I'll have to edit this part out of the show.
That's this Chandrillan bank
in the meantime, Kyle's building his own Death Star. But yes, again, to at least keep the lights on, even though in my current situation you could tell it's dark because I don't have very much light going on right now. To keep the lights on of the coaxium in our ship fueled so we can go from port to port, bar to bar, and tell us all the great stuff, it would help and behoove of you to make sure you leave us a 5-star positive review. Again, leave us what you like, but we appreciate it.
I just want to say to us, guys, it's always a great pleasure to be on here with you guys to talk Star Wars and What a Piece of Junk. But I want to also just give a little, since I got to hype the network here. But I spent my May 4th actually traveling with some Guardians in another section of space. I viewed Guardians of the Galaxy, and I rounded up my own team of a-holes to do our True Believers podcast, where we covered everything along with myself, Kevin Reitzel, Lee Fillingsness, and Lacey Adderhold. We covered everything involved with Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. If you've seen Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, go check it out. It's either on YouTube, on the Fandom Podcast Network YouTube channel, or we just put out the audio podcast version of that today. But check it out. We had a lot of fun. There might have been some music references. There might have been some references to some other things. Could have been a few tears. Could have been some heartbreak. But we had a lot of fun, and it was. I gotta admit, guys, it was weird having a Marvel movie drop on May the 4th.
Yeah, especially a Marvel movie that was so space focused.
Yes.
So clearly inspired by Star Wars, at least at the beginning, anyway.
I haven't seen it yet, but at least was there a Star Wars reference in this version or no?
I don't remember there being.
I don't think there was any like direct Star Wars reference.
Not like we got in Civil War with Spidey, making comments about taking
Yeah,
Ant-Man
no,
down like an
That's the
18.
problem. There
Okay.
was no Spidey in the Guardians, so
Gotcha.
Well,
Okay.
plus, like none of them have seen Star Wars.
Well, Quill could have.
Quill
Star-Lord
could have,
could have
but the
seen
rest
the
of them-
first Star Wars.
You can see the first one. Maybe he snuck in Empire, but yeah.
So, okay. Well, I was just
Cool.
hoping that they were releasing on May 4th that they would at least got that, but that's all
But
right.
it was a good movie. I recommend that you guys go see it, and then I recommend that you listen to the Fandom Podcast Network, because I did listen to Lee and the gang talking about it, and that was good too.
Awesome sauce. Well, we want to thank you for joining us, Kyle. We're always glad to have you on board the Drunken Gungan. And of course, we want to thank all of our listeners for joining us on this podcast. Please remember to hit us up between shows and let us know what you like or you don't like, what you want us to change. But always, please remember to respect each other and always respect each other's fandom. All right, Nathan, punch it.